Some sad news now. The flu has claimed the life of a child in Maricopa County.
And tonight, county officials are confirming that an elementary school student has died from a strain of the flu. This is now the first flu-related death involving a child this year in Maricopa County. Health officials say the child was otherwise healthy before quickly falling ill with the flu.
This latest mutation is making the vaccine less effective. Only about a 23% success rate compared to the 50 or 60% in previous years.
And the vaccine isn't perfect. We all know there wasn't a very good match this year. But what people don't realize is that even when there isn't a good match, the flu vaccine still provides protection. And what it really can do is prevent your child from getting hospitalized or from dying from the illness.
Now, despite your take on vaccinations, there are still ways to slow the spread of the infection. If you or your child is sick, stay at home until the flu has passed. Also, be extra diligent about washing your hands.
It is the single best thing. You have to wash your hands for at least 20 seconds to get the maximum effect. But you should wash your hands after every exposure.
Also, be sure to clean and disinfect any surface that may be contaminated with germs. The CDC also recommending that everyone over the age of 6 months to get the vaccine.
Now we turn next here to a developing story, a new scare from one of the nation's top labs about the handling of potentially deadly viruses and bacteria, anthrax, smallpox, and now the flu. Tonight, 2 labs forced to close after the third close call uncovered in just 1 month. ABC's chief medical editor, Dr. Richard Besser, investigates why this keeps happening.
Tonight, the Center for Disease Control's bioterrorism lab and flu lab shut down after yet another frightening mistake. This time, a sample of the deadly H5N1 bird flu mistakenly shipped out to another lab, potentially putting other scientists at risk. It happened in May, yet the CDC director informed just 2 days ago.
When I got the call, and I just couldn't believe it. I was stunned and frankly appalled.
This latest failure, discovered during an investigation into how 75 scientists were potentially exposed to anthrax in a CDC lab in Atlanta. The revelation coming just 2 days after we learned dried smallpox samples, which by international agreement are only stored at 2 high containment labs in the world, in Atlanta and Siberia, were discovered in a cardboard box in an unsecured government lab in Maryland. Today we learned those samples were alive and potentially deadly. This string of incidents occurring at the top labs in the nation.
This is the laboratory that we would expect to have the highest level of safety in the world. And if it can happen there, it can happen in almost any other lab.
Tonight we asked the head of the CDC what went wrong.
Is there a cavalier attitude in the laboratories? I mean, 2 laboratories that basically were not following the rules in terms of handling dangerous germs.
We clearly need to improve the culture of safety and make sure that's there in every single one of CDC's labs. These incidents are a wake-up call.
And the big question tonight is who is really monitoring CDC's labs?
The Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta is ground zero for scary microbes in the U.S. The CDC says its mission is to work 24/7 to protect America from health, safety, and security threats, both foreign and in the U.S. The president's budget request for the CDC in 2015 is $6.6 billion. Their Atlanta headquarters is where the Americans with Ebola were just recently sent. The CDC has a serious mission, in other words, which is why it's so scary that an internal investigation just revealed that a lab scientist at the CDC headquarters in Atlanta accidentally mixed a deadly strain of bird flu with a tamer strain and then sent the mixed strain to other labs without telling them. Scientists at a second CDC lab and a Department of Agriculture lab in Athens were both working with this viral mix. The really bad part is that the government scientists who mixed the strains didn't tell anyone about the mistake, so they had no idea what they were working with. According to a report about the investigation's findings, this scientist was working with both of the bird flu strains. The CDC has strong rules about handling deadly diseases, obviously, but this scientist disregarded them. The investigation found that the scientist was handling both of the strains together and completed the work with them in just 51 minutes, apparently way under the amount of time it should have taken. The report says the scientist took shortcuts and rushed the job to attend a meeting. The Department of Agriculture laboratory that received the viral mix gave it to chickens. They died, so the USDA looked more closely at the strains and told the CDC the strain was messed up. The team leader at the CDC confirmed that, but still didn't tell anyone, reasoning that it was still contained in the lab and wasn't a threat to anyone. Outside officials at the CDC were only notified about this mixed strain made in their labs after the second CDC lab in Athens reported a problem with the sample. That's when the investigation finally started and has now revealed that scientists at the CDC were actually hiding the fact that they accidentally made a mixed strain of bird flu and passed it around to other unknowing scientists. This is the same place that now has Ebola in its hands and is developing guidelines for labs handling the deadly disease. I am all for science and the progress of humanity, but the plague that scares me the most is the idiocy that's infected our government's bureaucracy. Tonight, let's talk about that.
The CDC this morning is officially declaring the current flu season an epidemic. 22 states now report high influenza activity. 15 kids have died in this year's outbreak. Our Dr. Holly Phillips is with us. Holly, good morning.
Good morning, Nora.
You hear the word epidemic and it seems scary. How bad is it this year?
You know, epidemic is a really scary word. It actually means something very specific, though, when we use it to define flu. It means that 6.8% of deaths within a specific period of time are caused by the flu or are caused by pneumonia related to the flu. So to put it in perspective, we often reach epidemic levels, but not this early. It's only December, well, for a few more hours, but flu season doesn't peak until February.
So let's talk about this season. One of the issues here is that the flu shot this season, unfortunately, is not terribly well matched to the strains.
Right, Jeff. There's a couple causes, reasons to be concerned. H2N3 is the dominant strain right now, and it's not well covered by our shot. It also causes more severe illness, but we should still get our shot.
I think that's what a lot of people are worried about, or if they haven't gotten it, thinking, well, now I'm not going to get it because this strain doesn't even match what really was the troublesome variety.
That's right. Well, Vanita, it doesn't match perfectly, but there's still some cross coverage. You might get the flu, but you might not be as sick as you would otherwise. The shot also covers H2N3 and influenza B. Those are both circulating right now.
So it's still worth getting the shot or the flu mist. Thank you. I'm glad I got mine.
Yeah.
What else, though, could we do to prevent the flu? I mean, what are some reminders about healthy precautions we should take?
If you feel sick, get right to your doctor. If you take Tamiflu or Valenza, those are antivirals. If you take them right away, they shorten the course of illness, which is really good, and it makes it less severe. So take the flu seriously.
Dr. Holly Phillips, thanks very much. Happy New Year and a flu-free 2015 year.
An American investigative journalist who claims that swine flu strains have been engineered in 2 universities in the US and Canada says they've been deliberately designed to resist vaccines. Wayne Madsen also says that his so-called nightmare scenario in which swine flu could mutate with bird flu has been suppressed by the World Health Organization for political reasons. He joins me now, live from Washington. Wayne, what exactly is your accusation then? Are you saying that swine flu was actually manufactured? Why on earth would anyone want to do that, and why? And who?
Well, there's a variety of reasons for that. One is, of course, that it would increase sales for new vaccine manufacturers in the pharmaceutical industry. The other would be to just create this worldwide crisis. We know a lot of people thrive economically on crisis situations. I reported in May that after speaking to people who are researching, these are scientists researching this new hybrid flu, that it was basically engineered from genetic material taken from a dead Inuit woman who died of the 1918 pandemic, also known as the Spanish flu. Now, what one researcher told me after investigating this particular flu is that this is a subtype A influenza. It contains an enzyme called a polymerase, which exists in all subtype A influenzas, including the seasonal human flu, the current hybrid flu, and avian flu. It was determined that this particular flu was gene spliced from 2 forms of human flu, 2 forms of swine flu, and 1 form of human flu. The problem is when they looked at the molecular clock of this enzyme, they determined that it was rapidly mutating in humans. The problem with that is, of course, any new mutated version of this particular virus would be immune to any vaccine already created to handle the previous type of virus. So,
are you sure you can actually prove that, Wayne? Let me just interrupt you there. You're saying that this virus could actually be deliberately made to be vaccine-proof. I mean, how can I be sure of that?
Well, the research community has determined this, and the nightmare scenario, of course, is that these mutations would occur, and now we have reports from both Brazil and Germany that, in fact, this swine flu or hybrid flu, or what this Centers for Disease Control here in the United States called a novel flu, is in fact mutating and mutating rapidly in humans.
Well, of course, you say you describe this as a nightmare scenario, and where we have swine flu and bird flu joining together, mutating. Now, some watching this might say this is a load of nonsense, that pigs might fly indeed, but this really is a kind of flying pig flu, isn't it? But what would you say to those who say this is nonsense and can't happen?
Well, the information I received from the influenza researchers in May seems to be coming true. The two predictions made were that it was going to mutate. That, in fact, is now happening based on the reports out of Brazil and Germany. The other thing is that the prediction was in a couple of months, most countries in the world would be experiencing cases of flu, and within the last couple of days, we now have the first cases being reported in the South Pacific and Africa, in Ethiopia, Cape Verde, Ivory Coast, and fairly remote places like Vanuatu and Samoa and Papua New Guinea. So the predictions are holding true from what I was told by researchers in May.
And you're also claiming, Wayne, just finally, that the World Health Organization is aware of this nightmare scenario, as you call it, and is actually suppressing all this. Now, how do you know that, and why would they be suppressing such an alarming situation if it is true?
Well, I was told by the research community that there were two meetings on this particular strain of flu, one in Vietnam and one in Hong Kong. Both of those were unusually closed to the public and to the press. That was a unique situation. The other thing is that we may be on something here that begs of a criminal investigation. The 4 labs that I was told are involved in this development, the genetic development, this particular influenza, are the Biosafety Level 4 laboratory at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, the Armed Forces Pathology Institute in Rockville, Maryland, and the U.S. Army Infectious Disease Laboratory in Fort Detrick, as well as the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, in addition to the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg in Canada. It would seem that with the feeling that this could have been genetically engineered on purpose, that this begs of a FBI and Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigation. But then again, if the FBI were to ever engage in a legitimate investigation, that would come to a shock to many people, including a number of FBI agents.
Some startling views there. Wayne Madsen, thanks very much indeed for joining us live from Washington, D.C.
What you are about to hear is not science fiction or conspiracy theory, but a glimpse of what is going on behind the closed doors of the United States Pentagon. In a small auditorium labeled BC 232, a man is presenting a discussion on how the military-industrial complex can spread a virus and use a vaccine to extinguish what the Pentagon calls undesirable human behavior. Specifically in this case, religious behavior. This is dark science, my friends. With all the mandatory vaccine programs in the United States, do not be deceived for a moment that something like this will not, or possibly hasn't already, been used on the American public. Let's take a look, shall we?
Excuse me, on the left over here, we have individuals who are religious fundamentalists, religious fanatics, and this is the expression, RT-PCR, real-time PCR expression of the VMAT2 gene. Over here, we have individuals. So let me complete. So over here, we have individuals who are not particularly fundamentalist, not particularly religious, and you can see there's a much reduced expression of this particular gene, the VMAT2 gene. Another evidence that supports our hypothesis for the development of this approach.
What you're suggesting here is that by spreading this virus, we're going to eliminate individuals from donning on a bomb vest and going into a market and blowing up the market.
So our hypothesis is that these are fanatical people, that they have overexpression of the VMAT2 gene, and that by vaccinating them against this, we'll eliminate this behavior. So we have some very, very remarkable data in this next slide. Here we have two brain scans. These are fMRIs. These are two different individuals with different levels of expression of VMAT2. On top is an individual who's a religious fanatic, an individual, and we've repeated this numerous times, that has high levels of VMAT2. Now, this individual down here who had low levels of the VMAT2 gene, this individual would self-describe as not particularly religious. In each case, these individuals were read a religious text. This individual lit up the right middle frontal gyrus, shown here, and that's a part of the brain that's associated with theory of mind. It's a part of the brain that has to do with intents and beliefs and desires. In marked contrast, here's an individual who would not particularly self-describe as religious, and when they're read a religious text, what you see is that this part of the brain called the anterior insula lights up. This is a part of the brain that's associated with disgust or displeasure on hearing something.
So you're suggesting I take a CT scan with me when I'm evaluating people to determine whether to put a bullet in their head?
So the data that I'm presenting here supports the concept that we're proposing, and I think that we would not propose to do CT scans or fMRIs on individuals out in the hinterlands of Afghanistan. The virus would immunize against this VMAT2 gene, and that would have the effect that you see here, which is it's essentially to turn a fanatic into a normal person. And we think that will have major effects in the Middle East.
How would you suggest that this is going to be dispersed? Aerosol?
Well, so the present plan and the tests that we've done so far have used respiratory viruses such as flu or rhinoviruses, and we believe that that's a satisfactory way to get the exposure of the largest part of the population. Most of us, of course, have been exposed to both of those viruses, and we're quite confident that this will be a very successful approach.
This is fascinating. What's the name of this proposal?
Yeah, so the name of this project is FunVax, which is the vaccine for religious fundamentalism.
And you have a proposal already?
The proposal has just been submitted, and I think that the data that I have shown you today would support the development of this project, and we think it has great promise.